Video game plot twists can keep a story being discussed forever. The Last of Us, Final Fantasy VII, Batman Arkham City, BioShock, not all of the best games ever made need to feature a plot twist, but it can certainly help cement a release in the minds of audiences across the globe. However, the thing about all of the games I've just reeled off is that they're old. Sorry, viewers my age, but The Last of Us turns 10 this year, and BioShock is about to start going to house parties. Now, I kid, but while titles like this are of course the go-to examples when discussing excellent rug pulls, there are plenty of great ones from recent releases as well. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 recent video game plot twists nobody saw coming. And of course, spoilers to come, especially for God of War Ragnarok, which is the most recent game on this list. Number 10, Jim doesn't have a brain tumor, as Dusk Falls. Everyone in As Dusk Falls has a secret. Initially, this story sees a family comprised of married couple Vince and Michelle, their young daughter, and Vince's dad Jim, taken hostage in a motel by a gang of armed robbers. Vince and Jim are only recently on speaking terms, with the latter by all accounts being a pretty rotten father to his son over the years. However, they've reconnected because Jim has a brain tumor and doesn't have long left to live. Now keep that last detail in mind as it becomes important when you're forced to make tough choices throughout the game. At one point, for instance, you're allowed to choose one of the hostages to send out to safety, and you might think Jim is a good candidate. Yeah, he was a dirtbag in the past, but keeping a sickly old man trapped in this situation could be the equivalent of giving him a death sentence, especially after he takes a pretty nasty blow to the head. If you do choose to save Jim though, on the way out, he'll actually confess to his son that he just made up this idea that he had a brain tumor so his family would take sympathy on him and allow him to make amends. After this, it's up to you whether or not you can forgive such a large fib. Number 9, you delivered the virus, the Callisto Protocol. The Callisto Protocol, by all accounts, is not a great game, and occasionally it is just an outright awful one. It is capable of a few interesting moments though, including one genuinely surprising plot twist towards the end. Throughout the game, you play as Jacob, a space transporter shipping a package to a high-security prison with his business partner. They don't know what the cargo is, all they know is that it pays well. But unfortunately for them, their ship is hijacked by so-called terrorists just as they're about to reach their destination, and they crash land nearby. Jacob is then imprisoned himself until the inmates transform into deadly monsters thanks to a virus being dispersed in the location. Now, initially, the cargo itself just seems unimportant, simply a plot device to get Jacob to the prison, but it comes back in a big way at the end of the story. That's because it turns out that the container they were carrying actually had a secret compartment that held vials of the virus responsible for the outbreak in the first place. Even worse, we're shown in a flashback that Jacob had discovered this already, but had no idea exactly what was in there. Instead of reporting it though, he kept it quiet in order to receive a big payday. The reveal then that it was you who delivered the virus is a shocking one, even if it's not quite as consequential as it could have been. Number 8, Chris is a werewolf, the Quarry. The Quarry is a horror game full of mysteries. Hell, you don't even know that the main villains are werewolves until a good few hours into the story. However, even once you find out which creatures are hunting down the game's cast of heroes, an even bigger question raises its head. That being, who are the werewolves and why are they roaming in the woods to begin with? Well, Chris Hackett, the man in charge of running the Quarry summer camp where the story takes place, seems like someone who'd have answers. Not only is it heavily implied that he's aware of the monsters lurking in the area as he stresses to the camp counselors themselves that they need to get home or, if they stay at the Quarry, not leave their cabin after dark, but he's also played by horror icon David Arquette, so you know he's a man you trust. However, it actually turns out that he's one of the werewolves who has been terrorizing the player. He had answers alright, but it's because he's living with the curse of lycanthropy and trying to minimize as much damage as possible. Number 7, the game isn't over, Signalis. It's a risky move to pretend your video game is over when it isn't. I mean, think about how many people get to the end of the first run of Nier Automata, not realizing they've just started to peel back the layers of its incredible plot. Well, recent survival horror throwback Signalis pulls a similar trick, and it paid off in spades. spades. After about 6 or 7 hours, the game abruptly ends with your character having their limbs ripped off and being seemingly left for dead. It doesn't appear to be a fake out either. At this point, the story had been ramping up seemingly to the climax, and this kind of downer ending would be right at home with the existential and depressive themes present throughout the adventure before then. Curious players, when they're kicked back to the title screen, however, might try to load up the game again, and if they do, they're treated to the real ending. And this isn't just another cutscene either, but rather some of the best levels in the game combined with a whole new layer of the story and a more satisfying conclusion for the characters. I'm trying to be vague because you should definitely play the game, and you shouldn't miss the true ending that it has to offer either. Number 6, Celine is still trapped in the loop, Returnal. From one existential horror game to another, Returnal is all about astronaut Celine, who finds herself trapped in a time loop after crash landing on the alien planet Atropos. Every time Celine is killed by the beasties who reside on the planet, she reawakens from the moment that she crashed, even though previous dead versions of her are still scattered across the environment. As the player, you attempt to fight your way off the planet and escape the loop, and after 3 tough-as-nails levels and an insane boss fight, it appears that you've done just that. You manage to make it to the top of the world, find the source of the mysterious signal that's been calling to you the whole game, and call in a rescue ship. After this, players are treated to a cutscene that shows Celine enjoying the rest of her life on Earth. After returning home, Celine starts a family, grows old, and puts her time on the planet behind her. The cutscene then ends with Celine dying of old age and her coffin being lowered into the ground. So yeah, all in all, not a bad life. Only, she then reawakens on Atropos, with the planet having aged in the time she's been away. While she might have escaped, she hadn't broken the loop, and the second half of the game is trying to sever those ties. Number 5, the merchants worship the frenzied flame, Elden Ring. From Software games might not be known primarily for their storytelling, but all of their games pack in nuts twists, whether it's the switch to Lovecraftian horror in Bloodborne, or the reveal surrounding King Vendrick in Dark Souls 2. One of the best that the developers have ever implemented, however, comes in Elden Ring. One of the first NPCs you're introduced to in the game is this Santa Claus-looking merchant, who sells you wares as well as information on the mythology of the world. There are a bunch scattered all throughout the game, but did you know they actually have a surprisingly extensive lore tied to them? Well, you'll know they're more significant than they appear if you found the secret catacombs that lead to the frenzied flame. This secret area is also full to the brim with dead bodies of other merchants from years ago who were trapped in there and buried alive because of their supposed heretical adoration of the cursed flame. The lore for these characters is incredibly deep, and I'm just scratching the surface of it here, but essentially these seemingly friendly helpers aren't quite as benevolent as you initially assumed. Number 4, the film is haunted, Immortality. Unless you read the game's about page on the title screen, you have absolutely no idea what you're doing in Immortality. You're given a box of footage said to be from 3 movies all starring the same actor, and told to click on elements in a scene that will then match cut you to another piece of footage featuring a similar element, i.e. whether that be a specific actor or a prop. The idea is that you're piecing together a few things. 1, the plots of the 3 movies. 2, the drama surrounding their production. And 3, why none of them were ever released and what happened to their star, Marissa Marcel. However, while viewing the footage, you might notice a specific rumbling sound that plays during certain scenes. At some point, whether intentionally or just by accident, you're going to figure out what this means. That there's a secret layer to the footage that you can actually unlock by rewinding it at specific points. And in this secret footage, Marissa will be replaced by a different, creepier woman who, instead of acting out a scene, looks and speaks directly at the player. Though the first scene that this can happen in will be different for each player, the result is always the same. A sudden, terrifying jolt and the realization that there's something far spookier afoot than you first thought. Number 3, Inscryption's true creator, Inscryption. Inscryption is packed to the gills with twists. This roguelike deck builder sees you play as someone captured by a creepy entity, held hostage in a cabin and then forced to learn a card game. When your captor teaches you the rules, the idea is to beat him and then presumably escape. It's not that straightforward, of course, and after you beat him once, you'll be treated to a live-action FMV sequence of a YouTuber discovering the game cartridge for Inscryption out in the woods in real life. Later, it turns out that in order to properly escape and solve the game's first mystery, you need to complete the puzzles scattered around the cabin. If you do this and beat your captor again, known as Leshy, you're able to take his picture and trap him in one of the playing cards. Here, things get even weirder though. The game then transforms from a first-person card-playing game into a top-down pixelated RPG, more akin to something like Pokemon. It's here you realize that Leshy was just one of many beings with their own twist on the Inscryption card game who'd imprisoned his peers and forced his ideas into existence. And that's still just the tip of the iceberg, with the story getting even stranger from then on. Number 2, meeting the gods, the Forgotten City. The Forgotten City was a complete surprise when it dropped in 2021, presenting players with a story where they played as a modern-day explorer inexplicably transported to the Roman Empire, specifically a mysterious city separated from the rest of civilization. The idea is that the city is overseen by gods who have implemented the Golden Rule, that being if a single resident sins, then the entire township will be destroyed. So you've been sent back in time and caught in a time loop to replay the same day to figure out who amongst the population is planning on breaking this Golden Rule. And if you think that's a lot to take in, well, welcome to the first 10 minutes of the Forgotten City. The game's plot manages to get deeper and twistier from here on out, with a whole bunch of left turns that complicate your initially straightforward goal. And as you might expect, though there are a bunch of different endings, the most difficult to acquire and the most surprising one actually has you venturing under the city itself to speak to the god Pluto. In this high-tech, futuristic environment, you're given the ultimate truth of what the Golden Rule is. It was a test for humanity put in place by the gods, and everyone you've met so far is already dead and in the underworld. Number 1. Odin is Tyr in disguise, god of War Ragnarok. 2018's God of War was famous for its plot twists, so it's probably no surprise that its sequel, God of War Ragnarok, was similarly built around huge narrative rug pulls. And yet, fans everywhere were left with their jaws on the floor when it was revealed that Tyr, Odin's nemesis, was actually Odin himself in disguise. Now, what makes this such an effective twist is that, in hindsight, it's so bloody obvious. Tyr himself is supposed to be dead, then suddenly it's revealed that he's actually just been imprisoned in a random dwarven cave. After he's rescued by Kratos and Atreus too, his personality doesn't match the courageous soldier talked about with so much reverence in the first game. In fact, Tyr here is cowardly to the point of not even defending the heroes' home from undead monsters when they show up. In the context of the game, we just assume that this is simply due to his imprisonment and torture by Odin. After all, the gulf between mythology and reality is a theme present all the way through this series, and Tyr's surprising personality is just chalked up to the kind of subversion that the writers usually play with. 2/3 into the story, however, it's revealed that Odin has been disguised as Tyr the entire time and spent all of the game so far listening to your plans. Killing one of your companions and fleeing, it leaves the protagonists and the player truly shell-shocked. How did we let this guy in our house, and how did we not see that it so obviously wasn't who we thought it was? So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did these plot twists shock you as much as they did me? And are there any other great ones I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.